Oh my God, Daniel, my son, why are you doing this to me? Where do I start from? How do I survive here? Ah!
Robert was 68 years old when his only son divided his life like it was already over. Daniel took the house. He took the car. He emptied the bank accounts down to the last dollar. And when all that was left was his grandfather's old farmhouse, crumbling, forgotten, and drowning in debt, Daniel laughed and said, "You can keep the dump, Dad. Consider it your retirement plan." But Robert noticed something his son never did. That farmhouse was the only thing his father had warned him about on his deathbed. Never sell the land, Robert. No matter what happens, you keep that land. So Robert did something his son would never understand. He moved in. He let Daniel think he'd won. And then he found what his father had been hiding for 40 years. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The story begins 3 years earlier, when Robert's world was still intact. He lived in a modest 3-bedroom home in suburban Colorado with his wife, Margaret. They had been married for 42 years. She was the kind of woman who remembered everyone's birthday, who kept photo albums organized by year, who made sure the Christmas lights went up the day after Thanksgiving without fail. Robert had worked as a civil engineer for 35 years, retiring at 63 with a decent pension and a savings account that represented decades of careful planning. They weren't wealthy, but they were comfortable. They had enough. Margaret got sick in the spring of 2019. Breast cancer, stage 3. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday afternoon, and Robert remembers the way the oncologist's office smelled like antiseptic and artificial lavender. They fought it together. Chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, more chemotherapy. Margaret lost her hair, then her appetite, then her ability to walk up the stairs without stopping to catch her breath. Robert became her caretaker, her nurse, her constant companion. Their son Daniel visited twice during those 2 years. Once for Christmas, when he stayed for exactly 36 hours before citing work obligations. Once for Margaret's final hospital stay, when he arrived 4 hours before she died and left 6 hours after the funeral. Margaret passed away on a Sunday morning in February 2021. Robert was holding her hand. Her last words were, "Take care of yourself. Promise me." He promised. But he didn't know how empty that promise would feel 6 months later when Daniel showed up at his door with paperwork and a plan. It was a Saturday in August when Daniel arrived unannounced. He brought his wife, Jennifer, and a leather folder stuffed with documents. They sat at Robert's kitchen table, the same table where Robert and Margaret had eaten breakfast together for 4 decades. And Daniel laid it all out like a business proposal. "Dad, we need to talk about your living situation," Daniel said. He was 42 years old, successful by most measures. He ran a real estate investment firm in Denver, drove a black BMW, wore suits that cost more than Robert's monthly pension. He had the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. "What about my living situation?" Robert asked. He was drinking coffee from Margaret's favorite mug, the one with the faded flowers on the side. "You're alone in a house that's too big for one person. The maintenance costs, the property taxes, the upkeep. It doesn't make financial sense." Jennifer nodded along, her expression practiced and sympathetic. "We've been researching senior living communities, Robert. There are some really wonderful options. Full amenities, social activities, healthcare on site. You'd have so much less to worry about." Robert set down his coffee. "You want me to sell the house? We want you to make a smart decision," Daniel said. "The housing market is strong right now. We can get top dollar. I've already contacted a realtor, someone I trust. She thinks we could list it within the month. Where would I live? There's a facility in Grand Junction called Sunrise Meadows. We toured it last week. It's beautiful, Dad. Private rooms, 3 meals a day, transportation services. You'd love it." Robert looked at his son, really looked at him. He saw a stranger wearing his child's face. "I'm 68 years old, Daniel. I'm not 88. I don't need assisted living. It's not about need, it's about being proactive. Mom handled everything. The bills, the shopping, the scheduling. Can you honestly say you're managing all of that on your own?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Robert thought about the stack of unopened mail on the counter, the frozen dinners in the freezer, the quiet that filled the house every evening. I'm managing fine, he said. Daniel leaned forward, his elbows on the table. Dad, I'm trying to help you. This house is a burden you don't need. And frankly, there are financial concerns. What financial concerns? You've been overspending. I've looked at your bank statements. Little things, but they add up. Eating out, subscriptions you don't use, impulse purchases. Those are my bank statements. How did you get access to my bank statements? Jennifer jumped in, her voice soft and reasonable. Robert, we're not trying to invade your privacy. We're trying to protect you. Daniel has power of attorney. You signed those papers 3 years ago when Margaret got sick, remember? In case something happened and decisions needed to be made quickly. Robert did remember. He remembered sitting in a lawyer's office, terrified that Margaret might slip into a coma, that he might not be able to make medical decisions for her. The lawyer had suggested adding financial power of attorney too, just to be thorough. Daniel had been there, supportive, concerned. Robert had signed. That was for emergencies, Robert said. This is an emergency, Dad. You're not thinking clearly. You're grieving, and grief makes people do irrational things. What are you proposing? Daniel pulled out a document from the folder. We set up a managed account. I oversee your finances, make sure everything is allocated properly. You get a monthly allowance for expenses. Everything else is protected. An allowance. A budget, Jennifer corrected gently. It's what responsible families do. Robert felt something cold and heavy settling in his chest. He looked at the papers spread across the table. Legal documents, financial statements, brochures for Sunrise Meadows with photos of smiling elderly people playing bingo. What about the car? He asked. Daniel glanced at Jennifer. You barely drive it, Dad. And honestly, your reflexes aren't what they used to be. We'll arrange transportation when you need it. I can take the car, keep it maintained, preserve its value. Robert understood then. This wasn't a conversation. It was a closing argument. Daniel had already decided. The house would be sold. The money would be managed. The car would be taken. Robert would be placed somewhere quiet and out of the way, somewhere he couldn't make a mess of his own life. What about your grandfather's farm? Robert asked. Daniel actually laughed. It was a short, dismissive sound. That falling apart shack in Montana? Dad, it's worthless. The county's been sending tax delinquency notices for years. It would cost more to demolish the house than the land is worth. Nobody wants property that remote. If you want to keep it, fine. It's yours. Consider it your inheritance. Robert nodded slowly. All right, I'll take the farm. Daniel smiled, relieved. Great. So we're agreed? I'll have the realtor come by next week to do a walkthrough of the house. I didn't say I agreed to anything else. I said I'll take the farm. Dad, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. You're taking my house, my car, and my money. I'm taking the one thing you don't want. Daniel's smile faded. You can't live on that farm. There's no electricity, no running water, no heat. It's the middle of nowhere. Then you won't have to worry about me anymore. The meeting ended badly. Daniel left frustrated. Jennifer left concerned, and Robert sat alone at his kitchen table staring at the brochures for Sunrise Meadows until the light outside faded to dark. That night, he couldn't sleep. He walked through the house touching things. Margaret's reading chair, the photo wall in the hallway, the bedroom they'd shared for 42 years. He thought about his father, William, who had died 20 years earlier. William had been a hard man, not given to affection or long conversations. But on his deathbed, in a hospital room that smelled like floor cleaner and defeat, he had gripped Robert's hand with surprising strength and whispered, "Never sell the land, Robert. No matter what happens, you keep that land." Robert had nodded, not really understanding. The farm had seemed like an odd thing to care about in your final moments. It was just property, just dirt and timber in the middle of Montana that nobody visited. 2 weeks later, Daniel returned with movers. Robert watched from the porch as his furniture, his belongings, his life was loaded into a truck. Daniel had rented a storage unit. "Just until you're settled," he said. Robert packed one suitcase. Clothes, toiletries, a photo of Margaret, and his father's old pocket watch. The watch was brass, heavy, with numbers engraved on the back that Robert had always assumed were a date. April 19th, 37. William had pressed it into his hand during that last hospital visit. "Keep this," he'd said. "You'll know when you need it." Daniel drove Robert to Sunrise Meadows on a Thursday afternoon. The facility was exactly as advertised. Clean, bright, full of activities and smiling staff members. Robert's room was on the second floor, small but adequate. A bed, a dresser, a chair by the window. Daniel shook his hand at the door. "You're going to be happy here, Dad. Trust me." He left before Robert could respond. Robert lasted 3 days. On the third night, he waited until the hallways were quiet, then walked out the front door. No one stopped him. No one even noticed. He walked 2 miles to the Greyhound station and bought a ticket to Helena, Montana with the $89 in his wallet. Everything else was frozen in accounts he could no longer access. The bus ride took 14 hours. Robert sat by the window and watched Colorado turn into Wyoming, turn into Montana. Mountains rose up, sharp and indifferent. The land flattened and stretched, empty in a way that felt almost holy. He didn't sleep. He thought about Margaret, about the promise he'd made to take care of himself. He thought about Daniel, about the moment his son had stopped being his son and started being someone who managed problems. He thought about his father, about land and secrets and last words that didn't make sense until they did. The bus dropped him in Helena at 6 in the morning. The air was cold and thin. Robert asked at the station about getting to the old Riverside area, about 40 miles east toward the canyon country. A man hauling feed said he was headed that direction and offered a ride. They drove in silence on 2-lane roads that cut through ranchland and national forest. The driver dropped him at a rusted gate with a broken mailbox that still read, W. Harrison. "You sure this is where you want to be?" the driver asked. "I'm sure," Robert said. He walked up a dirt driveway choked with weeds and saplings. The farmhouse sat at the end, and it was worse than he remembered. Much worse. The roof sagged in the middle. Windows were broken or missing entirely. The porch looked like it might collapse under the weight of a strong thought. But the land stretched out in every direction, 40 acres of Montana prairie with the Rocky Mountains cutting across the western horizon like a promise. Robert stood there for a long time, suitcase in hand, looking at the house his father had bought in 1965 for reasons Robert had never understood. William Harrison had been a machinist, a practical man who worked with metal and precision. Buying remote land in Montana had seemed completely out of character. Why? Robert had asked him once. Why buy a farm you're never going to work? His father had looked at him with an expression Robert couldn't read. Sometimes a man needs a place nobody else knows about. Robert set down his suitcase and walked to the porch. The steps groaned but held. He pushed open the front door and stepped inside. The interior was a disaster. Water damage, animal droppings, furniture rotted to frames. But the bones of the house were solid. Stone foundation, timber frame, good bones. He spent the first night on the floor wrapped in a sleeping bag he'd bought at a thrift store in town. He heated a can of soup on a camping stove. He listened to the wind move through the broken windows and the sound of his own breathing. He thought about Daniel, probably calling Sunrise Meadows by now, probably realizing his father was gone. He thought about the police, about missing persons reports, about being dragged back. But mostly he thought about his father's words. "You'll know when you need it." The next morning, Robert walked into town. Riverside was barely a town, more of a wide spot in the road with a post office, a hardware store, and a diner that doubled as a gas station. He bought supplies: tarps, duct tape, a hammer, nails, basic tools. The woman at the hardware store, heavy-set with kind eyes and a name tag that read Ruth, watched him check out. "You're fixing up the old Harrison place?" she asked. "Trying to," Robert said. "That house has been empty for 20 years. You family. I'm his son." Her eyebrows went up. Didn't know William had family. He kept to himself. He did. "You planning to live there?" "I am." Ruth looked at him for a long moment. "You know there's no water, right? No electricity. No heat. Winter comes early up here, and it comes hard. I'll manage. You got people who can help if you need it?" "No," Robert said. It wasn't quite a lie. He had a son, technically, but that felt more like a legal fact than an emotional truth. "Well," Ruth said, ringing up his purchases, "you need anything, you come see me. And I mean anything. We look after our own out here, even the stubborn ones." Robert thanked her and walked back to the farm carrying 40 pounds of supplies. He spent the next week making the house livable. He patched the roof with tarps weighted down by rocks. He covered the broken windows with plastic sheeting. He cleared out the debris and dead animals and 20 years of neglect. It was hard work. His back ached. His hands blistered. But it felt good. It felt like choosing. Every nail he hammered was a choice. Every board he replaced was a decision. He wasn't being managed or placed or handled. He was building something. Even if that something was just a place to sleep that didn't leak. At night, he walked the property. He didn't know what he was looking for, only that his father's last words kept circling in his mind. Never sell the land. Everything you need is there. Everything you need. What did that mean? The land wasn't valuable. There were no mineral rights, no oil, no commercial potential. It was just 40 acres of prairie grass and rocky soil. On the 9th day, Robert found the root cellar. He'd been walking the perimeter behind the house, looking for a good spot to dig an outhouse, when his foot caught on something. A handle, rusted and hidden under 2 decades of overgrowth. He pulled back the brush and found a wooden door set into the ground, rotted and covered in moss. Most people would have missed it entirely. The door was heavy and came apart in his hands as he pulled it open. Stone steps led down into darkness. Robert got his flashlight and descended carefully. The cellar was larger than he expected, maybe 15 feet by 20 feet, with walls made of stacked stone and a hard-packed dirt floor. The air smelled like earth and time. In the center of the room sat an old steamer trunk, the kind people took on transatlantic voyages before airplanes existed. It was covered in dust, but otherwise intact. Robert's hands were shaking as he opened it. Inside was a letter, folded and yellowed but readable. His father's handwriting, neat and precise the way it always was. Robert, it began, if you're reading this, then you needed the land. I knew you would. I knew Daniel would take everything else. He's like his mother's brother, God rest his soul, always counting things before they're his. I'm writing this in 1998. I'm 76 years old, and the doctors say I have maybe 2 years. Emphysema. 40 years of smoking finally caught up with me. I'm not afraid of dying, but I am afraid of leaving you unprepared. So I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone. I bought this land in 1965 for $3,000. Everyone said I was crazy, buying property in the middle of nowhere. Your mother thought I'd lost my mind. But I wasn't buying it for the house. I wasn't buying it to farm. I was buying it for what was underneath. Robert's heart was pounding now. He kept reading. 3 months after I bought the property, I started digging a foundation for a barn. I wanted a workshop, a place to work on projects away from town. 5 feet down, my shovel hit something hard. I thought it was bedrock at first. Then I realized the rocks had weight to them. Strange weight. I sent a sample to a geology lab in Butte. Told them I was a prospector, gave them a fake name. They confirmed what I suspected. Gold. Not a commercial vein, nothing that would interest a mining company, but a seam, a pocket, running through my property. Personal scale. Manageable. Robert sat down hard on the dirt floor. Gold. The letter continued. For 15 years, I came up here 3 or 4 times a year. I told your mother I was hunting, fishing, getting away. Really, I was working that seam. I'd dig for 2 or 3 days straight, extract what I could, then fill everything back in. I taught myself to refine it using books from the library. Built a small forge in the back corner of this cellar. It took me years to get good at it, years to figure out how to purify it without industrial equipment. But I did it. I processed every ounce myself. Never told a soul. I was afraid, Robert. Afraid the government would find out and claim it. Afraid someone would contest my ownership. Afraid of being robbed or killed. This was the 1970s. People disappeared over gold in Montana. Still do. So I kept it secret. I worked alone. I refined it alone. I hid it alone. By 1980, I had extracted everything I could reach without heavy machinery. The seam went deeper, but I was 58 years old and my back was giving out. I'd taken what I could. I sealed up the dig site, covered my tracks, and never went back. All told, I pulled out about 240 pounds of gold over 15 years. I refined it down to bars, rough but pure. Stamped each one with the date and weight. Then I built a vault and hid it all. Not to sell, not to spend, but to save. For you. For when you needed it. Because I knew someday you would need it. I know I wasn't a good father, Robert. I was cold. I was distant. I didn't know how to show love except by working, by providing, by making sure you had what you needed. I never hugged you enough. Never told you I was proud of you, even though I was. Especially when you became an engineer. You were always smarter than me, always better. I'm writing this letter because I can't say these things to your face. Never could. But I need you to know. This gold, this land, this secret, it's not an inheritance. It's an apology. For every evening I spent down here instead of at your school place. For every conversation I cut short because I was afraid of saying too much. For the distance I kept between us because I thought that's what fathers were supposed to do. I was wrong. And now I'm running out of time to fix it. The vault combination is your mother's birthday, April 19th, 37. The same numbers on the pocket watch I gave you. You'll find the vault door hidden behind the old crates in the northeast corner. It's painted to look like stone, but it's steel. Everything you need is inside. Not just the gold. Instructions. Assay reports. Maps showing exactly where I dug. Everything documented in case you ever need to prove where it came from. Use it wisely, son. Not to get rich. Not to show off. But to live. To be free. To never let anyone make you small. I love you. I always have. I just didn't know how to show it except like this. Your father, William. Robert read the letter 3 times. Then he sat in the dark cellar crying. Not from sadness. From something bigger than sadness. From recognition. From understanding. From the weight of being loved by someone who didn't know how to say it out loud. He stood up and looked around the cellar more carefully. In the northeast corner, behind a stack of rotted wooden crates, was what looked like a stone wall. Robert moved the crates. Up close, he could see it. A door, metal, painted carefully to blend with the surrounding stone. And on that door, a combination lock. Robert's fingers were numb as he turned the dial. 041937. His mother's birthday. The lock clicked. The door swung open. The space behind it was small, maybe 6 feet by 8 feet, with a low ceiling. And inside that space, stacked on wooden shelves, were bars of gold. Dozens of them. Robert counted. 62 bars in total. Each one roughly stamped with dates ranging from 1966 to 1980. Each one marked with weight and purity. His father's handwriting on every single one. Robert picked one up. It was heavy, maybe 4 pounds, rough around the edges, but undeniably real. Next to the shelves was a metal box. Inside were documents. Maps of the property with X marks showing dig sites. Assay reports from labs in 3 different cities, all under false names. Receipts for equipment. A journal documenting every extraction, every refinement process, every successful pour. His father had kept records of everything. At the bottom of the box was another letter, shorter this time. Robert, if you're reading this second letter, you found it. Good. You'll want to know what it's worth. Gold prices change, but as of 1998, these 62 bars represent about 240 pounds of gold at approximately 90% purity. At current market rates, that's worth around $1.2 million. Maybe more by the time you read this. Maybe less. The exact number doesn't matter. What matters is this: you don't have to sell it all. You don't have to sell any of it if you don't want to. But if you do sell, do it carefully. 1 or 2 bars at a time. Use private dealers, not banks. Pay your taxes. Keep it legal. Don't attract attention. And Robert, don't tell anyone about this. Not friends. Not family. Especially not Daniel. I know my grandson. He's ambitious. He'll see this as an opportunity, not a gift. He'll want to manage it, invest it, grow it. He'll take it from you the same way he'll probably take everything else. This gold is yours. Not ours. Not the family's. Yours. Guard it. Protect it. Use it to build the life I couldn't give you. Your father. Robert sat in the vault for hours. The flashlight battery died and he sat in complete darkness, holding one of the gold bars in his lap, feeling its weight. His father had dug this gold out of the ground one shovelful at a time, had refined it in secret, had hidden it for decades, had documented everything, had loved him in the only way he knew how. When Robert finally climbed back up the stone steps, the sun was setting. The Montana sky was on fire, orange and pink and purple. He stood in the overgrown yard holding his father's letter and looking at the farmhouse. It wasn't a dump. It wasn't worthless. It was a vault. A secret. A second chance. That night, Robert made a plan. He wouldn't touch the gold yet. First, he'd fix the house. Make it livable. Make it real. He'd do it slowly, carefully, in a way that wouldn't attract attention. He'd pay cash for everything, small amounts from the $89 he had left, then from selling 1 bar if he needed to. Just 1. The next morning, he walked back to town. Ruth was behind the counter at the hardware store. "You're still here," she said. It wasn't a question. "I'm still here. I need to hire some help. Know anyone who does construction work? Roofing, plumbing, electrical?" Ruth studied him. "That farm really worth saving?" Yes. Why? Robert thought about his father, about gold hidden in the dark, about secrets kept for 40 years. Because someone I loved built it. And I'm not ready to let it go. Ruth nodded slowly. My brother Tom does contracting work. He's good, honest, doesn't talk much. I'll give you his number. Tom showed up 2 days later in a pickup truck with his tools. He was maybe 55, weathered and quiet. He walked the property, inspected the house, took measurements. This is going to take a while, Tom said. How long? Done right? For months. Maybe 5. What will it cost? Tom did some math in a notebook. Materials, labor, permits if we need them. Maybe $35,000. Robert didn't flinch. Can we break it into phases? Start with the roof and windows, then work inside. We can do that. First phase, roof and exterior, probably $8,000. When can you start? Tom looked at him carefully. You got $8,000. Robert thought about the vault, about 62 bars of gold waiting in the dark. I'll have it by Friday. That Friday, Robert made his first trip to Butte. It was a 3-hour drive. He hitched a ride with a rancher heading to a cattle auction. In Butte, he found what he was looking for. A private precious metals dealer in a strip mall, the kind of place that bought gold from estate sales and prospectors. The man behind the counter was in his 60s, bald, with reading glasses on a chain. Help you. I need to sell some gold. What kind of gold? Robert pulled 1 bar from his backpack. He'd chosen the smallest one, just under 3 pounds. The dealer picked it up, weighed it, tested it with acid. Where'd you get this? It was my father's. He was a prospector. This is good quality. Very pure. I can give you $42,000 for it. Cash. The dealer looked at him over his glasses. I can do $35,000 cash. The rest check. Cash is fine. The dealer went to a back room and returned with stacks of $100 bills. He counted out $35,000 while Robert watched. You need a receipt? No. Your father find much of this? No, Robert lied. This was all he had. The dealer nodded, not quite believing him, but not pushing. Robert walked out with $35,000 in a backpack and took a bus back to Helena. Tom started work the following Monday. The sound of hammers and saws became the soundtrack of Robert's days. New shingles went on the roof. The windows were replaced with double-paned glass. The porch was rebuilt with treated lumber. Tom worked methodically, precisely, the way Robert's father had worked. He didn't ask where the money came from. Didn't ask why Robert was doing this. He just built. By October, the exterior was done. The house looked almost new. White paint, cedar trim, a stone chimney Tom had repaired and repointed. People in town noticed. Ruth mentioned it when Robert stopped by for supplies. Place is looking good, she said. Tom does good work. He does. You planning to stay? I am. Good. Town could use some new blood. Even old new blood. Robert smiled. It was the first time he'd smiled in months. Through the winter, Tom worked on the interior. Plumbing, electrical, insulation, drywall. Robert helped where he could, learning as he went. They worked in silence mostly, the comfortable kind of silence between men who understood each other without needing to talk. By March, the house was finished. Hardwood floors. A working kitchen. A bathroom with hot water. Heat. It looked like a home. It felt like a home. Robert furnished it slowly. A bed, a table, chairs. He hung photos of Margaret. He put his father's pocket watch on the mantel. He planted a garden in the spring, vegetables and flowers. He fixed the fences. He cleared the fields. The farm came back to life under his hands. He sold 2 more gold bars that first year. One in Butte, one in Missoula. Different dealers, different stories. Always cash. Always careful. The money went into a safe deposit box in Helena. He lived on almost nothing. Grew his own food. Cut his own firewood. Lived simply. He didn't call Daniel. Daniel didn't call him. 6 months passed. Then a year. The silence between them grew until it felt permanent. In the second spring, Ruth invited Robert to a town meeting. It was held at the community center, a building that looked like it might have been a church once. About 40 people showed up, ranchers and retirees and families. The topic was property taxes. The county was reassessing values, raising rates. Several older residents were talking about selling, moving away. An 81-year-old woman named Dorothy stood up, shaking. I've lived in my house for 50 years. My husband built it with his own hands. Now they're saying it's worth 3 times what we paid, and the taxes are going up to match. I'm on Social Security. I can't afford this. Where am I supposed to go? The room was quiet. Robert thought about his own situation. About Daniel. About the house in Colorado that had been sold out from under him. About being forced to move because someone else decided your life for you. He stood up. What if we helped each other, he said. Everyone turned to look at him. What do you mean? Dorothy asked. I mean, what if those of us who can afford it help those who can't? Not charity. Partnership. We pool resources. We figure out who needs what. We find solutions together. A rancher in the back row spoke up. Like a co-op? Like a community, Robert said. Like actually being neighbors. The idea took root. Over the next months, they formed what they called the Riverside Alliance. Robert contributed money from the gold sales, anonymously, through a fund he set up. Others contributed labor, expertise, time. They helped Dorothy pay her taxes. They helped a young family repair their roof. They organized bulk buying for supplies, reducing costs for everyone. Robert became the quiet center of it. He didn't lead meetings or make speeches. He just showed up. He listened. He helped. People started coming to him with problems. Tom's daughter needed help with college tuition. Robert made it happen. A rancher was going to lose his land to medical debt. Robert found a way. He never told anyone about the gold. He just quietly, carefully, used it the way his father had intended. To live. To be free. To help. Word spread. People in town started calling him Harrison, the way they had called his father. It felt right. In the fall of the second year, Daniel called. Robert was in the garden pulling carrots when his phone rang. He almost didn't answer. Dad. Daniel's voice was tight, controlled. It's me. Hello, Daniel. I need to talk to you about something. Can I come visit? Robert looked at the farmhouse, at the garden, at the life he'd built. Why? I'm in trouble. Financial trouble. I need help. What kind of help? The kind that requires a conversation, not a phone call. Can I come up there? Robert thought about saying no. Thought about hanging up. Thought about all the ways Daniel had helped himself to Robert's life. All right, Robert said. Come next weekend. Daniel arrived on a Saturday morning in October. He drove a Ford F-150 this time, not the BMW. He wore jeans instead of a suit. He looked tired. Older. Robert met him on the porch. They shook hands awkwardly. Daniel stared at the house. This is the farm. This is it. Dad, this is incredible. How did you? Come inside. They sat at the kitchen table. Robert made coffee. Daniel looked around at the hardwood floors, the new appliances, the home Robert had built. The business is gone, Daniel said finally. The investment firm. We had to file bankruptcy 8 months ago. Bad investments, over-leveraged properties, the market turned. We lost everything. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Robert looked at his son. I'm sorry you're hurting. I'm not sorry you learned what it feels like to lose everything. Daniel flinched. That's fair. That's more than fair. Dad, I came here to apologize. For what I did. For how I treated you. For taking your house, your money, your car. For putting you in that place. For all of it. Okay. I didn't understand until it happened to me. Until I was the one being told I had to give up everything. Move into a smaller place. Start over. I didn't understand what I'd done to you. Robert sipped his coffee. What do you want, Daniel? I want to know if you can forgive me. The question hung in the air. Robert thought about it honestly. About anger and hurt and the years of silence. About his father, who had shown love by digging gold out of the ground because he didn't know how to say the words. I can forgive you, Robert said. But I can't forget. And I can't give you money, if that's why you're here. It's not. I'm not asking for money. Then what? I'm asking if I can visit sometimes. If I can try to be your son again instead of whatever I was before. Robert looked at Daniel. Really looked at him. He saw someone who had been broken down and rebuilt. Someone who had learned the hard way. Maybe the only way. You're always welcome here, Robert said. You were always welcome. You just forgot how to knock instead of taking the door off the hinges. Daniel visited 3 more times that year. Short visits, quiet visits. They didn't talk much. They worked together on small projects around the farm. Fixed a fence. Split firewood. Planted trees. Slow, careful steps towards something that might eventually be forgiveness. On the 3rd visit, they were sitting on the porch watching the sun set when Daniel asked, How did you afford all this? Robert thought about the gold in the vault, about his father's letters, about secrets worth keeping. Your grandfather left me more than you realized. What do you mean? He left me a choice. To take care of myself. To not need anyone who didn't want to take care of me. I don't understand. You don't need to. Just know that I'm okay. I'm more than okay. Daniel nodded. He didn't push. The next morning before he left, Daniel hugged his father. It was awkward and brief, but it was real. Thank you, Daniel said. For what? For not giving up on me. Robert watched his son drive away and felt something loosen in his chest. Not forgiveness, not quite, but maybe the beginning of it. The years passed. Robert turned 70, then 72, then 75. The farm became a fixture in the community. He hosted gatherings, barbecues, holiday dinners for people who had nowhere else to go. Tom became a close friend. Ruth stopped by weekly with gossip and baked goods. Dorothy treated him like a grandson. Robert sold gold sparingly. One bar every year or two. Just enough to maintain the farm, to help the community, to live comfortably. He never sold more than he needed. The vault still held 57 bars, more than he would ever use. Daniel's visits became regular. Once a month, then twice. He remarried, a school teacher named Lisa who was kind and patient. They had a daughter, Emma. Daniel brought her to visit when she was 3. She ran through the fields laughing, and Robert thought about continuity, about second chances, about grandfathers who left more than they realized. On Robert's 78th birthday, Tom and Ruth threw him a party at the community center. 60 people showed up. They ate cake and told stories, and Ruth gave a toast about the stubborn old man who'd shown up 7 years ago with nothing and built everything. Robert looked around the room at faces he knew, lives he'd touched, a community he'd helped hold together. He thought about Margaret, about the promise he'd made to take care of himself. He'd kept it. In his own way, he'd kept it. That night, alone in the farmhouse, Robert went down to the cellar. He opened the vault and sat on the floor surrounded by gold bars that gleamed in the flashlight beam. He pulled out his father's letters and read them again. He'd read them dozens of times over the years. They never said anything different, but he needed to hear the words. This gold is not an inheritance. It's an apology. Robert understood now. His father hadn't been apologizing for being cold or distant. He'd been apologizing for not knowing how to be close, for showing love through work instead of words, for building walls instead of bridges. But he'd also been showing Robert how to love someone by giving them freedom, how to help without controlling, how to build something that lasts. Robert had done the same with Daniel. He'd forgiven him by letting him come back on his own terms. He'd helped the community by empowering them, not rescuing them. He'd honored his father by using the gold the way it was meant to be used, not as wealth, as a tool, as freedom, as love in a language most people never learned to speak. Robert put the letters back and closed the vault. He climbed the stairs and locked the cellar door. The farmhouse was quiet around him. Outside, the Montana night was huge and clear, stars scattered across the darkness like spilled salt. He sat on the porch in his father's old rocking chair and looked at the land. 40 acres that had saved his life, that had given him purpose when everything else was taken away, that had taught him what his father never could say out loud. You are loved. You are worth fighting for. You are more than what they try to make you. Robert died 4 years later at 82. It was winter, a February morning when the snow was piled high and the mountains were white against a blue sky. Tom found him in his sleep, peaceful, his father's pocket watch on the nightstand beside him. Daniel came within hours. He handled the funeral, the paperwork, the endless details of death. He went through his father's belongings carefully, respectfully. He found the letters in the cellar. He found the vault. He found the gold. 57 bars, each one stamped with his great-grandfather's handwriting. Each one representing hours of labor, years of secrecy, decades of love expressed in the only way William Harrison knew how. Daniel sat in the vault for a long time, crying. Not for the gold, for the weight of it, for understanding, finally, what his father had been trying to teach him. This wasn't about money. It was about choosing who you wanted to be. Daniel didn't sell the gold. He didn't touch it. He moved his family to the farm. Emma grew up running through the same fields Robert had walked. Daniel continued his father's work with the Riverside Alliance. He used the gold the way it was meant to be used. Carefully, quietly, to help. The farm stayed in the family. Emma inherited it when Daniel died at 71. She raised her own children there. They found the letters too, read them, understood. The gold became a family legacy. Not the medal itself, but what it represented. The choice to stay when everyone tells you to leave. The choice to build when everything's been taken. The choice to love in a language that doesn't require words. 3 generations later, the farmhouse still stands. White paint, cedar trim, stone chimney. The vault is still there, though the gold is long gone, used bit by bit to help people who needed it, to build things that lasted, to prove that wealth isn't what you keep, but what you give. On the mantle, in a place of honor, sits a brass pocket watch. Engraved on the back are 4 numbers, April 19th, 37. And beneath it, a small plaque with words that have been passed down through the years. Never sell the land. Everything you need is there. Not gold, not money, not security. Choice, freedom, the chance to decide who you become when everything else is stripped away. That's what William left Robert. That's what Robert left Daniel. That's what gets passed down generation after generation. Not an inheritance, an apology, a lesson, a love that doesn't know how to speak, so it builds instead. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything.